Toby, I grew up outside of Boston. And when I was in my 30s, I realized that a lot of my grade school classmates had moved to Maine. And even the closest part of Maine is, I don't know, 50, 75 miles from Boston. Then after I moved here, I started to notice that a lot of people who were living here and had to leave for whatever reason, they were moving to Maine. Now, you've done the exact opposite. You started in Maine and you ended up down here. But tell me about your life in Maine.
So I grew up in a north of Portland, about an hour and a half Portland, 30 minutes west of Augusta.
So you were pretty far inland.
Yeah. It's kind of a dump town called Livermore Falls, which nobody ever heard of, but it was near Maine, which you might have heard of that back in the 80s. There was the International Paper Mill was right there, and they had a big strike in the 80s. So the town was we had 400 kids in our school, that type of stuff. The town was vibrant because of the mill, and just like here with the tourists paying our taxes or second homeowners, the mill paid a lot of our taxes. So because they took so we had. It was definitely like I said, it was not a rich town at all. But because of the mill, we must have had 5 pizza shops and 7-Elevens and Cumberland Farms. And so growing up, it was, once again, not extravagant living or anything, but it was just kind of like your hometown place type of thing with the usual stuff.
Well, it must have been nice to live in a town that people haven't heard of. That does have its benefits.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So you were born and raised there?
Well, I was born in Pennsylvania, of all places, Quakertown, Pennsylvania, and I was only there for 2 years. My dad was, I think, a school teacher. He was from Maine, but they moved to Pennsylvania, and that's where I was born. So I'm really not a native anyway. Native of Pennsylvania, so. But
your father wanted to move back to Maine.
Yeah. He accepted a job as a vice principal back in Livermore Falls, and he never was there either. He was from 30 miles west of Livermore Falls as well. So why we ended up being in that place was something. Some of my dad's friends would call it the Pittsburgh of Maine. So.
Not sure how to take. Well, I've driven through Maine any number of times, usually without stopping. But my sense is that coastal Maine and inland Maine, where you grew up, are two very different things.
Yeah, growing up, it was, we would go to Old Orchard Beach as kids. That was our kind of fun time. That was about an hour and a half from us. But you didn't, as a kid, you really didn't notice where, say, the money, Old Orchard Beach is not necessarily a money place, of course, but like some of the coastal towns now, of course, Wells and all that is pretty elaborate places. But yeah, inland Maine was definitely a different, we grew up on ponds and, I still to this day really don't fish in the ocean. I just don't know how. I grew up on lakes fishing, you go out 3 a.m. where it's quiet and, a lot of beer, but but it was definitely a lot quieter on the ponds, I think. Yeah.
Did you hunt bear?
Beer.
Beer.
Drinking beer. Yeah.
Well,
we never caught much fish, but we drank beer. Yeah. So.
Did you have bear out there?
Yeah, there was bear. I only saw a few here and there, but every now and then you might see one. But it was very rare that it was even deer. We never saw anything like there is on Nantucket. There's, it's amazing when I tell my friends from Maine who are hunters the amount of deer that are on this island.
They don't want to come down here.
Yeah, they can't believe it. It's because you could be in Maine and you could hunt the whole season and never even see a deer.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so it's pretty interesting. So you were from what, Cambridge?
Cambridge.
Okay. Yeah. That's yeah.
Well, I drive up to Canada as often as I can, and to get to Nova Scotia from Hyannis, you drive to Bangor, and then you take Maine Highway 9 to New Brunswick. And the first time I did that, we were going along, and there'd be a sign saying whatever town it happened to be. But then I started seeing signs that said something like G9 472.
Right.
or F6 321. And I thought, where in the world? Anyway,
Right.
well, when I came back here, I found somebody from Maine, and she explained to me that is that lumber company land? I have to designate it somehow, even though there's no town there.
It might be. I can't remember what it was, but it was almost like almost kind of like down when you're down south and you're in these kind of non-existing. Yeah, I don't remember what the. I know what you're saying. It was almost like a township or
Except it
some
wasn't.
sort. That yeah, that
It
yeah.
was
yeah.
weird.
Right.
And
yeah.
they're still there.
Right.
Whenever I drive through there, those signs are still there.
Oh, so you go. So all right. So yeah. So my mother's family is actually from down East Maine, Machias area, and then I went to. So I know that Route 9. I went to vocational school in Calais, Maine, probably right where you cross the border.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
yeah. So that Route 9 is pretty long stretch.
Yeah, and pretty empty. But you mentioned Calais. There are a lot of Nantucket families who were descended from Calais, Maine residents.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I met an older woman who's no longer with us, and that's where she was from. And she said a lot of Nantucket people can trace back to Calais, Maine. Spelled Calais, pronounced Calais.
Right. Well, that's interesting to know. Yeah. I didn't realize that. So you still go there, Nova Scotia?
I try to get up there once a year, once every other year.
Yeah.
Nova Scotia or Prince Edward Island.
Okay. Yeah. It's a nice drive up there.
That's a lot of the fun of it, I think, is driving through Maine and driving through New Brunswick to get to where you're going.
Right. That's great. Yeah, that must be a little different than Cambridge, right? So yeah,
very much so. Yeah. So here you are in Nantucket. How did that happen?
So I was in the service. So I went from I was living in Maine, and I think I was 22 when I joined the service. So 91, and my last duty station, we were in Louisiana, and had some friends that were from Massachusetts, and we used to watch the show Wings, which is kind of a dumb story, but I mean, we used to watch Wings, and
popular show.
And as kids, my dad used to bring us we used to go to the Cape for the week, like Bass River. We'd stay in the Red Jacket, but we never came to Nantucket. Maybe my dad did. I never remember it. So I'd watch the show Wings, and it was like, that's a pretty neat place. So we would just watch that. I guess maybe it's think about home. We're from Massachusetts, and you have kind of but I kept thinking, wow, I really wouldn't mind going there. So I came home on leave my last year, and I just happened to look in the Portland Press Herald, and there was a job for carpentry, and that's what I used to do before I joined the Army. And so I applied. I came out here in the middle of February when I was on leave, and really liked it, and ended up getting the job, and then came right from the service right straight here, and I didn't go home first, just made it to the boat and came over so in March of 95.
And it must have felt warm here compared to where you grew up.
Yeah, because in March I'm thinking, wow, we're wearing short, sometimes in March, of course, on a nice. When I arrived here, we were having a decent March, and I was like, wow, this is an interesting place. But yeah, I remember my first trip when I applied for the job. Got to experience exactly, I flew over Island Air, and then got fogged in, so I had to take the steamship back. So that was my original trip, and my favorite story is, and I said this once at town meeting, I spoke in favor of saving the town, not taking eminent domain. It used to be, when I moved here, what was it, Easy Street, now it's Broad Street, whatever that corner of the town was. So I remember I was sitting there waiting for the steamship, and that was where I had my first beer, sitting next to Damian Keating. And
Keating, better known as John Keating.
Right. So and I actually said that when I was trying to tell. That was like, that's an island staple, that building, and I thought it was a shame that they were going to tear it down. Not because that was my first beer, but it was just an interesting experience. And Damien's a character on that. It was like I didn't just meet some tourist. I sat with a character from Nantucket, and he was showing me
real Nantucket.
Yeah. So that was. So I definitely experienced. So I'm like, if I like this place on the worst day, and I think it's February, I guess I can live here, you know? Yeah.
This was 91,
That was 95.
95.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 31 years ago. How easy was it to find a place to live 30 years ago?
So that was another story. So I was supposed to, the guy hires me. I'm supposed to live in his guest cottage, right? And I had no clue what, I was being in the military, they tell you what to wear, they tell you where to live. So I honestly had no clue about housing being an issue anyway. So I supposed to stay in this cottage. And I'm like, great, this is nice, and I end up getting there and said, all right, let's go to work. We're going to work. And as we're leaving, he's like, after work, we got to find you a place to live. The cottage fell through. Oh my God, he says.
Not what you need to hear.
So I'm like, all right, but I'm thinking it's not anything difficult just because, we're not used to not having any clue what Nantucket was about, or even, because where I lived in Maine, you need a place to live. There's always something for rent. I mean, we lived wherever, and
Most places are like that.
yeah, and not very nice places to live, but you could find a place to live. So, thankfully, one of the places place I was working at, the architect in the office, he was renting a room from. When did you get here? 95? Did you?
No, I got here in year-round 71.
Oh, okay. So you probably remember Joanne Holgate, who used to be our town clerk.
Yes, I do remember.
So he was renting a room from her. It just happened they had another room available. So thankfully that night I was moved in to that house. And so I was very fortunate that, as I always say to this day, so I moved in with an island family, who I really was good friends with her son to this day. We're still good friends. And, it could have been I could have been here a week and had this worst experience and been gone. I think it's just amazing how things fell in the right way.
And you had a year-round place?
Yeah, year round. Yeah, it was out on Hummock Pond Road. Yeah, and so it was perfect. And I lived with two other guys, her son, and then the other guy who still lives on the island. So we were all friends too, and because the son was Joanne's son was a local, I started to kind of get to know many of his friends, and so once again it could have been the total opposite. As I said, I could have moved into a house with 30 people, been in a basement,
You're very fortunate.
Right.
That's, as I said, 35 or 30 years ago. In your case. In my case, I remember being here in the 70s, and 50 years ago, there was one 5-year stretch where I moved 13 times.
Wow.
It was ridiculous. My car was my closet. All my junk was in my car all the time. There was no point in unpacking all of it because I'd be repacking it in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But it's as bad as it is now. It's been bad for a long time.
Right. And at least back then, though, even after I moved with them, that years down the road, I would do the same, the shuffle.
Yep.
Thankfully didn't have to live in my car, but the same deal. You get a winter rental, move out, but now I don't even think there is the Nantucket Shuffle anymore. You rarely see that. It's just.
Well, I think people say, I'm not putting up with this stuff, and they leave.
Yeah.
Which is very unfortunate, but I get it. If somebody is fed up with the housing, and I've seen people who've lived here for 20 or 25 years, and they finally say, I can't live like this anymore. I've got to go.
Yeah. And it's too bad, and it goes kind of both ways. Like, I think a lot of the reason why there's not the Nantucket Shuffle either, that a lot of people don't want to rent their houses in the winter because, and we've been burned before, like not myself, but like I was on a board with our church, and we rented a house. And a year later, we never got paid, and it just because the laws were so much for the tenant versus I think people get nervous. I think people get nervous. Imagine, because I remember the years like you could rent a house here, there, but can you imagine showing up in May and they're supposed to be moved out of your house and like they just don't leave? Yeah. But I do agree. And I don't know the answer to how it changes,
An local attorney told me a number of years ago, and it was what you just brought up. The tenant and landlord laws in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, never mind just Nantucket, but in the Commonwealth, the laws are stacked in favor of the tenants. And the reason for that is those laws were set up to prevent unscrupulous landlords in urban areas from taking advantage of tenants. But the same law applies whether it's
Right.
a 10-story building in Boston or a shingled cottage out in the country on Nantucket. The same laws apply, and it's easy for a tenant to take advantage of the law at the expense of the landlord.
Right.
So until we change the state law.
Right. And unfortunately, in the defense of the tenants, there are a lot of landlords who really,
That's true.
so it does, so I'm not always just one way, like, oh, it's always because it's, and I think that, it's funny. So like during, like, we were talking like in the 90s, I feel like, somewhere along the line, just people really started to say, wow, I can get this much for my house.
Yes.
I'm going to do it. And I just don't get me wrong. As you probably know, we've had plenty of conversations. I'm very pro-capitalist, but I also am pro treating people fairly,
I agree with you.
and like just because you can get $7,000 a month, is your house really worth, so now seasonal rentals, that's different. That's if somebody wants to pay that tourist wise,
40, 50,000 a week, never
and
mind
if
the
that,
month.
and if they want to pay that as tourists, that's their business. But when it comes to housing and you're saying, here, you can use the laundry once a month, and it's kind of,
Yeah, it's a crazy situation, but that's old news by this time.
Yeah.
Today, are you still a carpenter?
No, I do. Well, I still do a little of it. So I do lawn sprinklers is my main business, and then I do caretaking as well. And so I will do small repairs if needed. So I always tell my customers I have the skills to fix things, but I'll never try to tell you I can fix it unless I can fix it. I'm by no means a general contractor, but I still have the skills to do some things, if you will. Yeah.
Well, now we're in I forget what stage it is, but Nantucket is in a drought right now.
Yes.
How does that affect your business?
So right now it's not hurting too bad. We thankfully have a lot of customers on wells, and that's not affected by the state mandate.
Right. Well, you can do what you please.
Right. And even the town ones, it's not affecting us yet because, we can't run them, but our customers are still asking us to get them all set up. So if we do finally get out of this drought, they can turn it on. So, and I try to be honest with the customers, and I let them know that, I don't know if this is going to come out of it this summer. I really don't. If we're already in it now, I don't, but they still want me to set it up. And, so it hasn't, but I am worried that it will affect us, because if we're not allowed to run it, then nobody's going to be doing that extra work. But I don't know, I guess it's one of those things. It's like, thankfully I have the caretaking, and I've always kind of felt like anything in life, nothing, you always got to be prepared for what if this,
if you're smart,
there's always a scenario. I do, once again, don't get me wrong, I hope things turn around, but I also, a little concerning, but it's a good time to think, okay, what else can I do? I do have the caretaking, which, because of the two, I'm able to do both. Maybe I end up doing a little more caretaking or whatever, but it's definitely gonna be interesting. Yeah.
Well, when you're not at your job, what do you do?
So I'm a member of the American Legion, Post 82. I do that. I like to do a lot of traveling, and when I can, if of course. So
where do you go?
So we go to so we try to go once a year at least, somewhere in the Caribbean, or a couple of years ago we've done the Aruba a couple of times. I like to go down south. We have a couple condos down in South Carolina with the year-round rentals, but I like to travel down south. When I say travel, we're not traveling the world. all the time, of course, but like to go places warm if we can. We go to Old Orchard Beach once a year. Me and I still meet up with my old roommate here from Nantucket, and we all go meet and play golf for the weekend and just kind of hang out. And so just like, and I think that's a lot of it. My wife's from here, so for her it doesn't matter if she ever leaves the island. Sometimes, where me, I think you still got to go off and be on the other side here and there.
Well, it often seems that there's some people who, even if they love it, they've got to get away all the time, sometimes very far away. And other people, going to Hyannis is a big deal.
Right.
I mean, I tend to be towards the latter. These days, if I get to Hyannis, I'm doing well.
Right.
But anyway, you're politically active also.
Yes. Right.
Talk about that.
So, as you know, I'm chair of the Republican Party. We've had meetings and stuff like that. So, I'm currently the chair of the Republican Party here in Nantucket.
Meaning the town committee?
The town committee, yes, yeah. And I forget when we reformed. I think around 2020, and I was elected chair. We were pretty strong back in the early 2000s, back in the days when, I don't know if you ever remember Donna Hamill. She ran the party. Yeah. And so there was a lot of us that were pretty active in that, like when Scott Brown won for Senate. And so trying to be as involved as I can now with our committee, but it's not an easy thing on Nantucket.
Well, it's a blue town in a really blue state.
Correct.
So you've got a tough row to hoe.
Yeah. It's an interesting, it's really hot. A lot of candidates will come over and they'll say, "Hey, set us up with a little fundraiser," or go out to, and it's so hard as a Republican to call a local restaurant and say, "Hey, can we have so and so here?" Not that we're not asking for their sponsorship. We're just asking, and a lot of people just don't want to have anything to do with us, and because they're afraid of that stigma that they're endorsing. We've had some people, and we don't take offense by it, but it does get kind of tough to do. And I got to say too that I was thinking about this the other day. Nantucket is not a real political place to start with. It's because we're here. You really, even fellow Republicans, it's hard to get them energized because we're kind of in this bubble that we really don't know what's going on Beacon Hill right now. A lot of us.
Well, it's a different planet in a way. And, you pick up a ballot, and today, just by coincidence, is election day here. Have you voted yet?
No, I'm going to do that after.
Neither.
I was going to, and then I'm like, I'll do that after. Yeah. And
you pick up the ballot, and unless it's a statewide race or a national race, you don't know what party these people are. I mean, select board candidates, I don't know if they're Republicans or Democrats, and to a certain extent, I don't care what they are.
Correct.
They're speaking to local issues that transcend party politics, in my view.
Yeah.
So it's more difficult to be party aware,
right,
in a place like Nantucket, or I suppose any small town would be the same way.
Yeah, and I also have found that, up until the last few years, you rarely would see even political signs. Even during the presidential elections for years, you would rarely see a lot. I think really in the last 10 years have we started to see more of the
It has changed a
the
lot.
organization, which I think is good, as long as people once again take them down. Take them down after and they don't need to be up 35 months or something like that. But I really think, the month at least going into the election is a good thing to have. So we were doing during the 22 elections, when we really kind of started being a little more vocal, we would stand at the Rotary and we would campaign for the governor candidates and different things. And we started to do that. I think it's good that people do it. It's encouraging to see when people are out doing it. It's I just don't think there's whether it's time or whatever, there's not a lot of people really energized with politics on Nantucket. Yeah.
Well, the sign thing, you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember growing up in the Boston area, there were signs everywhere you went.
Yeah.
There were too many signs, really. But down here, you never saw them. And as you say, now you do. It's a change.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's good to, like, I was talking to somebody who was running locally once, and they're like, "Wow, people know me. I don't need to put out." And I said, no, you need to. You just don't have to be overboard with it. I said, they know you're running, but you got to at least maybe a week ahead of time put in at some random spots. You don't want to go crazy and make people like, oh my God, I'm just so tired of seeing this sign everywhere. But you got to be respectful where you put them and that. But people need to know you're working for their vote too.
Well, in the old days, when it was a smaller town, you could get away with not putting signs up. But there's another difference way back when. I might say that. I mean, the 60s into the 70s. Most Nantucket voters voted Republican by far. But if you looked at party registration, there's a huge number of independents.
Okay.
But almost all those independents voted Republican. And slowly over the years, it's changed so that this is now a blue town. But in the summertime, if the summer visitors were voters on Nantucket, I think you would see a red town.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's been my sense.
Oh, totally. Like, I have people say to me, like, geez, how does that, you guys are a total blue town. I said, oh, absolutely. I said, but the summer's the opposite. I mean, we could just go through some of the names of the heavy hitters that we know are Republicans. And, but no, I would agree that many, probably, I wouldn't say majority, but definitely, the majority of summer people are probably Republicans.
That's my sense.
Yeah, homeowners and stuff. And we still have a lot of heavy hitters that are Democrats as well, that are second homeowners, but I do think a lot
There are not as many, though.
No, I would agree that there was, and every year there's always, and of course too on the Democratic side too, that, you on the big side, you got, say, the Bagleys always have the Clintons and,
Joe Biden every Thanksgiving.
Right. And then you have on the Republican side, when there's up there on Hinkley Lane or whatever, they always have the fundraisers for the Republicans. So yeah, there is, but I would agree with you that I think the summer people are probably more Republican than most. And I think that's why they can get these big fundraisers out here. Yeah.
Surprisingly big sometimes. Let's go back to the Republican Town Committee. How does that work? How does somebody get on that committee? I know they appear on the ballot from time to time, but how does that whole process work?
So when if you just have to be a registered Republican, and then we're allowed 35, say, members that are official members, 35, but anybody can come join our committee if they're a Republican. But we have 35 that we say elect on the ballot, and that makes them able to, say, go to conventions, and we're actually just a voting member, but you can't, but we don't, it's not limited. We could have 100 Republicans and come to our meetings, and they can come just like any of us, but there's 35, say, members, which honestly, that's a good question, because now that I got to backtrack, that any Republican can be a delegate at a convention, but we only have 35 actual official members in our committee, which we usually have trouble finding 35.
And they come, that's a result of the ballot.
Yes, the 35, yeah.
And presumably some are going to get more votes than others. So, but if your name is on the ballot and you get at least one vote, does that automatically put you on the Republican Town Committee?
Yes.
Oh, it does? All
yeah.
right.
And so what it is you can vote for one, or you can vote for, or there's a spot you can also just vote all. There's a section that somebody, and a lot of people don't really, that they might be an unenrolled, and they don't really know, so they don't know whether, for instance, Amy Eldridge and myself might be on the ballot together.
Yeah.
And they don't know whether they're voting for one of us, each of us, or whatever. So yeah, you will see that the numbers might be a little different, but in general, they can just check the mark that says all.
And can you write somebody's name in?
I think you could, and if that person wants to be on the, so you have 35 members allowed, and where I usually only have, say, maybe even 20 of us on the actual ballot. So if somebody wrote a name in, it would be perfectly. It's really just an organization. I think it's really just an organizational process for the state committee.
Now, for yourself, ever thought about running for office locally or statewide?
I've thought about statewide before. I thought years ago of local, but I just think there's so many, and I won't lie, there's so many things that I just don't interest me, or it's just way over my head, like some of the zoning issues or the I watch these meetings, and I think I don't know how these people can sit through a 3-hour meeting and just kind of talk about. Now the state side, I've always wanted to do it, but I just don't ever know. Once again, you go back to, could you win type of thing.
And you have to travel a lot. I mean, there's no Nantucket representative anymore. It's somebody representing Nantucket and parts of the mainland.
Right.
And if you want to go to all those cities and towns, you got to do a lot of traveling. And what if the fog comes in? And what if the wind, kicks up? It's not easy.
Yeah. And then also, really, you have to, in a sense, you almost have to have an apartment in Boston if you're really going to be, or somewhere in the outskirts. And although they make a lot more than, say, a select board member, the math, it really isn't there in terms of, but I was approached 2 years ago by some of the committee members wanting me to run. And from the state committee, some different friends that I've known over the years, and they kept saying, "Oh, you got to do it." And I was like, I wasn't prepared then. I would have been a little more prepared now, if just financially and whatever. I still have a daughter in college and stuff like that. But definitely 2 years ago wouldn't even have made sense. But then probably by the time I'm finally ready, it's probably be just. But who knows?
There's nothing easier to understand than why somebody would not want to run for political office, whether it's select board or senator or whatever.
Yeah.
I think everybody out there would agree with me.
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Definitely,
just getting elected is a tough job. Never mind doing the job.
Oh yeah, and it definitely would be a tough thing to get elected, especially and to do the job, and my dad was he was a state rep from Maine, and also my grandfather, so that's kind of where that's where it all kind of came.
This is in the genes.
Yeah, that's kind of where it all kind of started. Was I used to go to the state house and with him, and you'd have pages. I don't know what they call them in Mass, but you would say run errands for the legislators during session and things like that. So I really got that interest in the politics type of thing. Yeah. So but yeah, I enjoy election night and stuff like that, and I presidential elections to me has always been just a fun night. I grew up with we had parties on nights of election parties, and so I've continued that tradition here with my group.
Well, you're a brave man being a Republican in Massachusetts, so my hat's off to you. Toby, thanks for dropping by, and I look forward with the polls later on today.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you. Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Okay, great.
I didn't know. Was that done? Were we done?
We were done.
Okay.
Yeah.